Wow, that year went by in a flash. I don't know about you, but the older I get, the faster it becomes. Even with all the trials and tribulations that 2023 has thrown at the developers, studios, markets, and of course all of us, we still had another bumper year in many ways. Very bumpy indeed. A theme you'll see throughout my list. Now, as per the schedule, this is my personal best graphics, technology and art across the year of gaming, and it is ranked only on the collection of these, as just great art or tech is not enough to win. I look for the best use and cohesion of these into the final results, including execution, and art is always a huge reason games captivate our eyeballs. I include my standard look back 40 years into gaming's history, as I was both playing and writing my own code at the time, small games, and at that point in the 8-bit era it was starting to boom. The chapter selections gives you a fast track, and it may have some surprises along the way, and I welcome your comments and thoughts on your best games and if you agree or disagree with my list. So let's start with the terrifyingly terrific number 8.
A giant machine or something.
Hey, Beta, I'm actually on my way to the Burning Shores.
Oh, right. Gaia and I heard about your mission from Silence.
Horizon would have been a great pitch meeting to sit in on, don't you think? Effectively, imagine Avatar meets The Land That Time Forgot with Dinobots, except Dub McClure and men in rubber suits are no more. Who doesn't love dinosaurs and arrows anyway? Now, we all know it went well, so well in fact we're back with a second son and daughter in Horizon Forbidden West last year, and then the huge update to Burn Our Shores this year. Guerrilla excels for a cross-gen title. It still managed to feel very next-gen often, even on the PS4, and why it landed rightly so as my number 1 last year. Now, I'm sure having this on my list again will anger some, but in reality the changes and updates here that we have over the main game include things like image quality, which is now almost impeccable, with the original having issues on foliage and subpixel details, something the game does not shy away from. They worked hard to improve the AA methods and deliver a reconstructed 4K-like output across all modes of play, which is another boost it offers, giving you 40 to 120 FPS options, and at times the sacrifices to hit those heady heights can be minimal, and they really have pushed hard on the PlayStation 5 with additional gameplay modes that weren't possible on PS4. Now, scale is a big reason games impress us, and this is where Burning Shores raises the game. Flying in the stratosphere and then swooping down to dive into the teeming ocean below, it's astonishingly large in scale, GTA-like in that regard, and the ability to fly above everything through the clouds, attack and battle with some of, if not the most beautiful clouds we have seen in games, and the new abilities, you can really appreciate the enormity of the map you are in. This added a new dimension to the combat, the traversal and set pieces, and I loved it. Volume was ramped up, and again the clouds, the volumetrics and lighting are all combined to create some of the richest and most impactful visuals in games to date. From the astonishingly good character models, which stand shoulder to shoulder with other epics such as Rockstar, Remedy and Naughty Dog. From textures, animation, bone rigging, materials and reactions, it ticks all the superlatives and dots them. I love the fact the facial animation uses hand keyframe and performance capture, as it helps bring some of the cartoon style emotion that I miss as we strive to be closer and closer to photorealistic. And this is not that. This is a dream state. This is hyper realistic, and it works so very well in this expansion. The improvements are clear, and some have come in patches to the entire game as well.
Back at the park, he said he's gonna crush us like bugs. Pretty sure he's gonna use that.
The game leans into interaction and dynamism at its core, and its enemies and scenery all have procedural destruction. Combat, although not perfect, can create some of the best moments in the game's visual and visceral impact, and it can be hard for many games to achieve this, but Horizon has style, and gameplay is where it excels the most. It really has it all: lighting, time of day, effects and water, and the very best use of the controller in the business in that dual sense. The triggers, the feedback and overall dexterity boost it offers, along with the soundscape and music, leave nothing that I can find a negative. Well, I simply cannot warm to the main story itself, and certainly Aloy, but that is not something unknown in games and movies. But the boosts and that epic final battle is worthy of the price of entry alone, and I'm sad I simply never had the time to cover this when it launched, but this is one of the best DLCs on current gen, and it adds a great deal to the main game, and even if some of those would have been nice on the game's original launch, I still think it did enough to make my list.
You're a quick learner? Well, it's you and me now, buddy.
James Cameron has the Midas touch, but Avatar is his biggest by far. Ubisoft Massive were given the task of turning this tale into a game, and they expanded their own Snowdrop engine to accommodate the world of Pandora, with a big push from the team to create an efficient engine, both in delivering high quality on consoles, but also fast in-engine iteration for the entire development team. The improved engine now supports ray trace global illumination and reflections, essential for the game's visual requirements, along with volumetric clouds, with the dynamic shifts of time of day and weather driven by an impressive art direction that relies on the engine's volumetrics and striking light and material quality. It creates a full swathe of thickets, streams, leaves, and a realistic and active organic world full of colour and life at every turn. Be it down in the swamps cleaning up the place, or soaring through the clouds as you see pockets of height fog, it adds depth and solidity to Pandora. Some sections can see you wading through a real pea super during battle, and others high in the sky as sun beams through those same volumetric clouds. The focus of the engine and the art team is within the rich and voluptuous trees, flora, moss and streams across the biomes. The lighting system is the most impressive. The engine deploys a forward plus rendering solution, which means it uses a fat G buffer for rendering anything missed within that forward pass for transparencies, and this means reflections. One of the weaker areas is the reliance on projected cube maps and SSR, with only static objects being reflected in that BVH pass. The dynamic and sheer micro polygon density of the world is remarkable at times, but it is often just trees, rocks and plants, and once you meet the other Navi, humans and populated areas, the compromises are harder to ignore, and this is where the quality falls off, hindered by the game's first person view. Animation, camera motion and the lack of flamboyant set pieces or cinematics hurts the game's impact the more you play. A wide quality level of robotic motion and faces lacks a great deal of bones to add emotion well. The PBR materials of non-plant-based objects don't hold up quite as well, and it had its fair share of bugs, but that was hardly unique to this game alone. But the disconnected nature is the biggest hit for me. Like Starfield, in that everything feels chunked off. Cutscenes fade to black between all of them, even for a few seconds or more at a time. The game is also a slow loader, with many sections feel constrained by memory management, as they often hide loading sections with airlocks or these black screens, which give the game a stop-start nature throughout. The movement of flora and fauna, combined with the stylized lighting and fog volumes, ray trace GI and sheer organic density, is the standout visual benefit this brings, with consoles missing none of that quality. The rich world of the movies is created superbly. It simply falters in the consistency of the constituent parts, along with the disjointed flow throughout. It is an excellent example of the technology and artistic skill within the studio, and it may become the new Dunia single engine for Ubisoft. I just hoped for a more symbiotic meld and higher consistency throughout, hence where it placed on my list.
We're not the same. No. They are too close. Go. I'll meet you at base camp by the waterfall.
Kill him.
Oh no!
Walk away. A Jedi.
Respawn are one of the most ambitious and diverse studios in the business, having delivered multiple huge successes in both the highly contested Battle Royale but also massive old school single player hits. The huge success of the excellent but buggy Fallen Order missed my top list in 2019 due to the sheer amount it had and nothing more. Similar issues also impacted where I placed this Unreal Engine 4 title. The visual quality and seamless flow of the game's action, story and exploration still works incredibly well. No surprise, as the studio is led by ex-Infinity Ward experience heads in Vince Zampella and Jason West, but the game direction is expertly crafted by God of War 3 lead Stig Asmussen, and it gets the meld of scale, drama, emotion and pacing that these games need. God of War 3 is still the pinnacle of that series from a pacing and scale level anyway, as far as I'm concerned, and Stig was a big part of that. But the team behind him are even more integral, and this has been realised again with Survivor. It starts with a bang and closes off the first game's threads neatly, but sets you up for even more to dive into. The sheer size and expanse you are thrust in mirrors the original series so well, with light blooms, lens flare, sprocket systems everywhere, and some excellent use of ray tracing with the game's RTGI, which can improve the light bounce and shading quality of locations and characters. But the quality of the human and alien aspects within is as vital. This feels like a world that George Lucas, when he was good at least, would have made. The animation and topology of the models is superb. Industry-leading performance capture sells the scenes, and although the dialogue and acting can be campy, likely intentional to mirror the originals, it still works well. Many shots and locations look like copies or inspirations from the inspired matte paintings of the legendary Welf McQuarrie and crew. And they also target the same artisan style of mixing them into the character shots, just like the originals did. It has some enjoyable and bombastic set pieces, a decent villain arc, and a good use of effects, PBR materials, and a great balance of animation quality and gameplay first demands. The combat is where the game shines the most though, vital for a Jedi game, and it is here that I had the most fun. But the visual spectacle on display was also impressive, and it hooked my interest with its visual flair, accurate muse inspirations and creativity that it delivered. So why only 6 on my list then? Well, as I covered at launch, the game had a decent 30fps quality mode on consoles, Series S did suffer, but generally was more stable and consistent than the previous launch. But the performance mode was simply not fit for purpose on consoles and took months to get patched. However, the PC version was really bad, with the game suffering from streaming stutter and DX12 shader related issues as well, albeit the game could run higher settings and frame rates than the console versions. Even on the highest end hardware, it could never hold a stable frame rate, and in general the console versions were more stable, but they still had their own issues outside of that quality mode. And as before, this took the shine off the game, and playing through the updated version is how it should have launched. Even if the PC still needs work, the console versions are at least much better, and we should never excuse that from any studio, no matter how pretty the wardrobe is. As Yoda said, do or do not, there is no try. Square had a busy 2023 with 2 big releases landing. Although both had good and bad elements within, the anything but Final Fantasy Episode 16 was the far more flamboyant, impressive, and aimed for a modern spin on the old NES and SNES origins. Powered by still unnamed engine, it does strike remarkable similarities to Forspoken and 15's Luminous engine. Whatever it may be called, it certainly delivers the goods. Gorgeous character models, opulent locations, materials and lighting throughout, ray trace shadows and competent screen-spaced AO and reflections all work to unify the consistent and authentic medieval setting of the game. A variety of destinations adorn your map and adventure, your clan builds and shrinks as you go, a myriad of voice talent, and some of the best looking real-time and some pre-rendered cinematics this side of Square's offline farm.
I'm here to even the odds. Any objections?
It's him! The outlaw! Sid's here!
And it is here, and in those Devil May Cry Dragon Ball Z icon battles, where the team stretch all of its limbs and flex. Final Fantasy was always about the story and the big battles, something 16 achieves often. The variety is excellent, the use of cinema grade tone mapping, edge lighting, soft depth of field, camera angles, emotive facial and body animation, along with a robust lighting system that supports all times of day, pre-baked GI and shadows in addition to dynamic lights excel. The icon battles are the most explosive, with ginormous titans that make you feel insignificant, and yet in true Goku style you push on to victory. Kakarot would be proud. It is the sections outside of these that are the weakest link, again like its forebearers. Some characters are very bland and robotic, textures and locations can have weak aspects, limited detail and confined spaces. Here the visuals can look more cross-gen than next-gen, but these sections are your bread and butter RPG areas to chat, learn, upskill and trade. Far from the worst but also not the best, and because of its high highs and low lows, it appears a little further down my list than it would have. It still stands as an excellent return to form for Square, a good but simple story, great characters and voice work from the largely English cast was also a highlight, as it represents such a breadth of accents across our isle and not just the stereotypical London tones. I hope the PC release next year can push even harder on some of the weaker areas I covered in my IGN review and secure a bigger market and sales for the team, as they deserve all the success they can get. One of the biggest issues in technology and even wider corporate and commercial world is consolidation, and the biggest tragedy of this is reinforced with my number 4. Having missed my list at launch due to the then largest market in the current generation consoles being a mess, and with their in-house Red Engine struggling on the hardware, the PC was always CDP's heart and focus, and here it excelled, so long as you could feed those demands. But 3 years later, the 2.0 update in Phantom Liberty finally pushed on from that, and again, high-end PC is where this shines the most. Embracing full path tracing with the support of Nvidia, it delivered on many holy grail elements of ray tracing, reflection, shadows, ambient occlusion, and obviously global illumination. From bounce light, dynamic shadows, deep occlusion, and vivid detail across static and dynamic objects alike, it raises the bar on the previously stunning high-end PC version. Focusing on reconstructed ray tracing quality, the improvements were obvious both inside and out. No matter if walking through Night City, exploring the desert dwellings, or battling a giant mechanical spider, the sheer amount of light, effects, shadow, and material quality excels. But the depth of character models, the art design, the lighting construction, and the vivid neon punk aesthetic consistently impress. And even though current generation consoles and AMD cards lose out to the Nvidia focus, it still manages to show off the bespoke, tailored quality of their proprietary technology better than any other game, making this final appearance something of a Greek tragedy. From a technical and art-driven perspective, it is one of the best melds of technology that improves a game, but it also highlights just how good lighting, scenery, and set artists are in creating similar quality to the untrained eye as those path trace solutions. Sure, quality, accuracy, and more so time are significantly improved and reduced respectively, but it often shows you that games, like movies, are all about the smoke and mirrors to achieve a result, and the Red Engine was able to pull the wool over many an eye. Now CDP have moved into Unreal Engine, they become another, albeit them very large, consumer of off-the-shelf UE5 toolkit, which dilutes both the diversity and signature games bring to the table. That menu lost a vibrant dish with Cyberpunk 2077's Red Engine.
I'ma fucking destroy you.
B, catch! Give it a taste!
Rust and piss, shitbot!
One of the biggest books and movie franchises had a second bout of gaming releases, things have moved on significantly since the PS2 days, yet the team managed to release on everything from high-end PC to Nintendo's Switch, and cutbacks and performance problems aside, it still managed to deliver a diluted version of the bigger machine's magic. The passion the team put into the game is evident right from the opening cinematics. Although it is using the old air quotes Unreal Engine 4, it delivers a stunning rendition of Hogwarts and the menagerie of creatures and characters within those halls. The details in the character models, the animation, the textures, the materials, the light touches, such as the animated paintings that react and dance as you explore the school, to the giant beasts and hobgoblins that conspire to defeat you. The lighting and scale of the landscape is a vital aspect the team succeeded in, wrapped up with brilliant particle effects. A broad range of RPG elements, skill sets, travel and combat enable some exciting set pieces throughout. From physics destruction, using those canned animation to great effect with the Repario spell, and they even managed to deliver one of the biggest collections of modes on consoles I have tested, from 4K 30 right up to DRS-based 120 FPS. The sales cemented the passion and quality the game delivered, and I was impressed by much of that in my reviews. A cross-generation game at heart, highlighted by that Switch port more than most, it manages to push the newer consoles with improved lighting, materials, level of detail, loading, and overall quality, which includes some excellent ray trace reflections, which improve specular and diffuse surfaces dramatically. Dynamic lighting and time of day demonstrates how good the lighting and physically based materials are. You can clearly see the division across hardware, but also the effort put into each port to work as close to the original aims with intelligent nips and tucks. It has such a variety and consistency, from the Forbidden Forest, spooky graves, English hamlets and cottages, and Gothic revival Victorian inspired school grounds impress often, and were a step above the majority of the releases this year. I did hope an improved FSR 2 or 3 implementation would come, as the image quality was my only main gripe with the poor FSR 1 implementation at launch, not sufficient to keep such a dense foliage and contrast game as stable as it should, certainly in those higher performance modes. Now, even though I am as far from a Harry Potter fan as you can get, I still found much to appreciate and enjoy in this game. Well done one, well done all.
Standing by.
The 1977 Star Wars movie, like the 79 Star Trek movie, was a big moment in my childhood. As a sci-fi fan from an early age, these captivated me along with the entire world. By the time the Atari arcade came round in 1983, the saga had almost run its course, with Jedi releasing the same year. But the hype and love for all things Jedi was still high, and this arcade was a stunner, incorporating key moments from the movie, namely the Death Star attack, in the full sit-down speech-sampled extravaganza. It is a game that stuck in my childhood, as I was able to play on a single 50p in the full sit-down cab in the arcades, and it was the height of the social aspect of arcades, at seafronts, pubs, chip shops, clubs and large arcades during the early to mid-80s. Atari were pushing further with its vector graphics, as seen in the earlier Battlezone, and on a big and bright CRT the game stood out from the crowd, and the sounds. Even in its upright cabinet, it looked and sounded the part, unlike the Atari VCS port, which although was closer to the main game than Zaxxon, it looks and plays like a lost in translation port. If you squint, it kinda resembles the arcade. Kind of.
Luke, trust me.
Yahoo! You're all clear, kid!
Dragon's Lair was another that popped your eyeballs out on stalks when it landed in the same year. Taking the superb quality of Don Bluth into a video game would have been thought impossible back then, and it largely was. The game was little more than a Laserdisc interactive movie before they became a thing towards the end of the decade and early 90s. QTEs wrapped in stunning Disney-like quality was the aspiration, and although it looked the part, it never had the legs to keep you playing, but it was always a crowd puller and shows that visual quality and beauty always sells to the masses, even if they tend to lose their luster fast if they have little substance beyond that veneer, which I think summed Dragon's Lair up perfectly.
Dragon's Lair, a fantasy adventure where you become a valiant knight on a quest to rescue the fair princess from the clutches of an evil dragon. You control the actions of a daring adventurer finding his way through the castle of a dark wizard who has enchanted it with treacherous monsters and obstacles.
At home, we had the third generation starting. After the Atari VCS and Coleco had started to lose its wow factor and that luster, at home, Nintendo launched its soon-to-become ubiquitous Famicom alongside the original Sega SG-1000, the precursor to the MK3 or Master System we all remember from 1985 onwards over here in the West. And the Acorn Electron released to cash in on their own success with the BBC brand microcomputer the year prior. By now, my VIC-20 was getting old, and using the BBC at school was never as often as it was quite limited. But the most successful Sinclair in that spectrum had started to explode in the UK and Europe. Commodore did not want to let the market go, and it was this 1983 Christmas where I got my first and mind-blowing Commodore 64, which was a gigantic leap forward from my VIC and older ZX81. This was the beginning of the micro boom and bedroom coding revolution across the UK, with new games and companies popping up overnight, mail order sales, and it was a time I recall with fond memories and very good vibes. The ironic thing was neither the Commodore 64 or Spectrum were designed with games as their focus, but that was surely what made them such a success. Sandy White's Ant-Attack was a stunner on a little rubber-keyed Specky. He was more into the electronic side of computers, and he hand-wrote all the assembly on line paper and keyed it into the Spectrum via a ribbon cable feed. What stood out was this was a large open map and 3D with an isometric viewpoint. Largely taking inspiration from Zaxxon the year earlier, this was far from common, and it looked unique at the time, with it actually being a true 3D map covering all three axes. Now, this was far and away the most impressive Spectrum game in '83, which a few of my schoolmates would show off with. Rightly so. The VIC-20 is harder to call. On a pure technical grunt level, Capture the Flag offered two-player split-screen 3D exploration on the little VIC, 10 years before Doom was even a twinkle in Carmack's eye. It looked mind-blowing, although I never saw the game myself until the late 80s at a workplace. The quality and skill still stands up today. I was, however, playing a fast-paced arcade shoot come collect 'em up in Jetpack from Rare, Ultimate, as their debut title on the Spectrum and VIC-20. The packed screen, fast smooth action and loud bombastic sounds brought that arcade-like gameplay home. The Commodore 64 was only just getting started, and I had no games with mine aside what I typed in or made myself at Christmas '83, but a big game that did launch that year, but I believe I did not play it until early '84. Was Forbidden Forest, was another early survival horror title that showed the early promise of the VIC-2 and SID chip sound. Huge chunky sprites, parallax scrolling, bright colours and panic-inducing gameplay and sound opened the window on just what it could do. Nothing of this quality would be possible on the Spectrum or VIC, and it felt one big step closer to arcades. Well, until they jump forward again. So if I had to pick my top titles for each in 83, then obviously Forbidden Forest takes it for the Commodore 64. For the arcades, the best was clearly Star Wars, which blew the roof off for me, and Jetpack takes the gold star on the VIC-20 as it pushed the machine hard and it still looks good today. Ant Attack clearly stood proud for the Spectrum, though with the limits of the hardware seemingly stretched so early, it showed promise for what was to come. But where and what were you playing then? Would you pick the same or different winners? Let me know in the comments below. But now, back to the modern era. Peter Parker has been hanging around for a long time in the comic book, movie and video game space. Dating back to the original Atari VCS in 1982, we have seen New York's favourite web-slinger across almost every single bit you could muster. But none have the technical impact and wild-scale Big Apple pizzazz that Insomniac mustered with the PS4 Spider-Man Epic. The PlayStation 5 got its own dedicated sequel this year, and the team ramped up everything over that previous PS4 version. From expanded combat, controllable characters, the density and size of Manhattan you can explore, but they also pushed the character models, hairspline specifically, very hard, with excellent lighting design on many sections in the game looking like pre-renders from only a few years prior. Ray tracing was another area they improved, and it stands out as another benchmark for what quality the PS5 can deliver. We have seen some excellent uses of ray tracing over the past few years, and even in this list. But when it comes to ray tracing reflections on consoles, Insomniac took the trophy and they cemented it in this sequel. It was much more than that though, with a strong art design, big action moments, and some of the best animators in the business. Everything you do in the game feels responsive, flamboyant, and fluid. Even the web slinging and traversal saw a big push to drive that SSD and memory speeds as hard as possible. From soaring across the city at breakneck speeds, rift-apart style portal jumps, and incredible set pieces, it delivered on an engaging and dramatic cinema blockbuster with high visual fidelity worthy of the name, and certainly most loved Raimi trilogies. From the art design, lighting, post effects, facial model quality, and overall fidelity it offers, it rarely fails to impress. Pushing even harder, as the team loved to do, they went over and above with that same 4K 40fps mode and another 120fps mode. Even if the demands in this new game mean we saw lower performance levels than the prior remaster, it only lost some of its luster to the sheer over-delivery of Insomniac themselves with those excellent remasters and the still stunning Rift Apart. As such, the game does feel like the same generation sequel when compared to those prior PS5 remasters. Not a surprise, and this is the only reason it narrowly missed out on my number one slot, which does not change the fact that the team are still top of their game, and it remains a standout game both in marketing draw and reinforcing just why Insomniac have been the single most prolific studio for PlayStation since the PS5 launched. But they were in some ways their own worst enemy. It does have a few signs still that it's a cross-generational engine at heart, but overall this is a flamboyant sequel to Spider-Man and Peter Parker's tale, and Insomniac poetically take my number 2 slot.
Guys, the water tank on the Matheson building should do the trick. We're talking 10,000 gallons here. Got it. Thanks, Genki.
Is Logan okay? Call me back as soon.
Remedy have long since been a pioneer of game technology, specifically in the PC space. The demo scene I knew well in the UK and wider Europe from the 8 to 16-bit world would have influenced this Finnish team back then, but they chose the IBM compatible PC route to market, and since the late 90s became a big name in a small collection of 3D forerunners. Alan Wake 2 is nothing new in gameplay terms, very much a fixed path narrative driven single player game as the team's bread and butter, this latest title pushes towards photorealism that they started to achieve with the excellent Quantum Break on the Xbox One hardware, a game that still stands up well today. With Alan Wake 2, the team delivered another stunning looking title that leans in heavily on their in-house technical chops and narrative aims. Being the first ship game that I'm aware of that uses mesh shading with strong commercial links to Nvidia, it pushes hard on this and ray tracing thanks to their own custom in-house engine, the Northlight engine. From the gorgeous and dense forest, smooth scaling of geometry that uses that meshlet system, performance, motion captured characters, flamboyant special effects, and exquisite use of colour tones, light, shadows and volumetrics, it takes you on a journey through the mind and body with some memorable moments throughout. Some mild spoilers here, but the way the game shifts between worlds, the incredible character models, the light, the shadows were all a highlight for me. The use of ray tracing was great, and on the top settings with an equally top spec PC, you can see the benefit it has on shadows, reflections and overall quality, largely due to the noise and dithering it resolves. From an art and lighting perspective, they know their craft well and hide any weaknesses from the assets with this often, and we get many superb and uncanny valley moments during those real-time sections. Ultimately, I was torn this year between the top three, and even slightly beyond that. Any one of them could have been my number one. Alan Wake 2 is my top pick due to its confined and excellent quality, along with its focus and success on those aims. But the deliberation was all of the elements of the technology, the graphics, the art, and the implementation. As it is arguably one of the best looking games on current generation and PC, but the leap never hits as hard as going from Alan Wake on the Xbox 360 to Quantum Break on the Xbox One. It also had many fallback options on consoles and medium range PCs that felt unfinished and could have been better. Maybe they were likely due to time, cost and schedule constraints. The triple constraints strike again. But it also joined an oversubscribed club across all of this list, with its fair share of bugs, and some were bad, some were hilarious, a classic it's a feature not a bug. But in comparison, all of these were true for others on this list, if not more, and Remedy are not a team of comparable size, but the quality more than goes toe to toe with those weaker moments being less obvious or often. Let's be real though, the real reason it's my number one is this. When a game delivers one of the most memorable and Eurocentric sections I can recall in recent years, complete with 80s perm soft metal tunes, dancing stages and flare gun kills, it remains one of the best looking games in 2023 and unarguably another technical stunner from Remedy. I just hope this all pushes the Max Payne remake up to those mind-blown levels I am expecting. We certainly got teasers of the quality in the game, and I cannot wait to dive into that pulp once again. A non-conforming, sometimes confusing but often surprising, was always a worthy winner for me. Remedy take my 2023 slot and a 6-string guitar. Many games missed my list for various reasons. Resident Evil 4 Remake was another cracking showcase for Capcom and the RE engine, but it was not a vast increase over Village, which alongside GT7 was good enough to be considered in their PSVR 2 guise, which was a year I loved for my VR gaming. RoboCop is an all-time classic, and Rogue City did a decent job. If closer to RoboCop 2 than the Verhoeven original, it was a good game, but visually and certainly technically, it was far from top tier. It demonstrates how good kit bashing in UE5 has become, alongside talented environment and lighting artists can create such good quality. but the amount of issues I had, even with patches on all formats, with characters in floors getting stuck, corrupted sound, looping gameplay, locking you into a Groundhog Day scenario, and other issues, left a very mixed affair.
Carrion spotted!
You're there. That's the quarry.
Armored Core 6 was my top game of the year, as you would have seen in my full review earlier this year, and the art was again a highlight, but technically it was not treading any new ground. Sadly, Microsoft missed any slots again, with Forza and Starfield both failing to impress, although Hellblade 2 next year should compete for the top slots, I feel, which is a saving grace, as 2 years off my list is a great shame. But what did you place as the top? Do you agree, or have you yelled at my choices throughout this video? Leave all your thoughts and feedback below, and I'll catch you very soon in 2024 here or over on IGN. Thanks for watching, and be sure to play the field. I'll catch you on the next one.